you. So for the chair's update, just 3 meeting reminders. On 2 weeks from tonight, on March 29th, we'll be having a joint meeting with the Finance Committee for a discussion on the 10-year Capital Improvement Plan. Our next meeting of the Board of Selectmen will be on Monday, April 5th at 7 p.m. And then on Tuesday night, April 6th, there will be the budget workshop with the FinCom at 6 p.m. That's the traditional budget, the old budget Saturday. So that would be it for me. John, to you for the manager's update.
Thank you. A few announcements. We had the state has provided some information about residents at Kelly's Corner. I'm pleased to announce that within the last few weeks, they received funding for moving forward with their project, which is again 100% senior and adult with accessibility housing units, which will be in Kelly's Corner. And I believe they'll get started working on that in this calendar year, which is very exciting for that to move forward. We also received 2 grants in the last week. I wanted to mention to the board. The first is a grant that will help us provide weekend and I believe evening transportation options. It's $30,000 grant through Mass Development. This is a partnership with Austin, our transportation in our transportation office, and Franny Osmond and Laura Ducharme and a few other people that worked on this. So it's a great way for us to supplement our existing transportation programs with some on-demand after-hours services provided by local taxi or livery companies. So look out for that. There'll be more information available. And if you have any questions, you can always call the hotline 978-929-6600 or directly to Crosstown Connect Dispatch 978-844-6809. The other grant was for providing assistance to businesses on Quarry Road. This is part of the Baker administration's and the Department of Housing and Community Development's local rapid recovery plan. And it's a $60,000 technical assistance grant, which is going to give us a consultant data engineering, and they're going to help us work on some strategies to help our Great Road businesses recover from this recent pandemic and other ways to promote economic development along that corridor. This is a project that it's called Rapid, so we're supposed to do it right away, and it's actually supposed to help us find access to state funding later this year. And so to make sure that we have an inclusive process, we have a staff working group that's going to proceed on it, but we'd also like to include members from a few boards to make sure that we have input from that level of the organization. So we're going to ask the planning board to have someone join us and the Economic Development Committee. And from the Board of Selectmen, I believe the chair as liaison to economic development would be joining us as well. But it'll lead to a good inclusive process with some community input as well. Actually, Great Road businesses are getting a survey this week to start the process. So it really is an accelerated program. Any questions about that, please contact my office. The other thing is, all the other things are later in the agenda. Thank you very much.
Sure. Member minutes, Jim?
Let's see, I got a couple things. The Commission on Disabilities had a great meeting that included Frank Ramsbottom, our building commissioner, and we were able to learn more things, including some information about accessibility requirements and new construction that's going to apply to 67 Powder Mill. So when we get around to that, we'll have some more information about that. What else? I know John Mangiarotti mentioned that this was about to happen last time, but just wanted to celebrate the good news of putting 26 Carlisle Road out with an RFP for being developed as affordable housing. I think it's good news that we're keep finding ways of making progress on affordable housing. Another little piece of good news. The Danny's Place, along with the Acton Boxborough United Way and other organizations, sponsored has set up for 2 trainings for active bystanders. These are particularly for us white folks who want to know how to be helpful if we're in a situation where there starts to be racial slurs or a threat. This gives active, real training in how to intervene safely and effectively. And the good news is that those 2 trainings were filled up immediately. So Danny's Place is going to continue to look for more opportunities to offer these trainings, and there's clearly a pent-up interest in these kind of trainings, which is really good news. And finally, well, I'm not sure what to say about the COVID anniversary, but here we are. It was just about a year ago when everything shut down around us, and I think for me, the good news out of that, out of all the horrible news that's out of that, but there is some good news, which is how well our town of Acton responded, how well neighbors took care of each other, how there was mask making by volunteers, how the town stepped up and the town staff stepped up in so many ways. How the neighbor brigade took on the work of delivering food from the schools to neighbors. It was just. It was a time when I'm just very proud of how everyone in Acton stepped up about that. And now that we can sort of vaguely see the light at the end of the tunnel, as people are beginning to be vaccinated, I think it's important to sort of acknowledge the anniversary, and so we can prepare to eventually move on.
Thank you, Jim. Joan? No, David?
Yes, a couple things. So the school district is transitioning back to in-person learning for any families that want to do that. It's a complicated process because they still have to maintain 3-foot separation in the classrooms, and it's also will require reconfiguring classes and things because I think they have about 200 students that want to move from the fully remote learning to in-person. So it's almost kind of like the beginning of the school year. Not quite that bad, but they have to change a lot of things around. And the second thing in the school building, if you recall, I mentioned at one previous meeting that this was some time ago now, that there was ledge found where they were putting in the foundations and where they intended to locate the septic tank. Now ledge is also confirmed where they need to bring in the utilities. Unfortunately, they had a test pit 10 feet away from this area that showed no ledge, but there's ledge where they need to bring in the utilities. And so it's quite a bit of ledge, enough that they are going to have to blast to remove it. And they're already reaching out to the neighbors about that. It also means some changes a little bit in some of the outdoor work, like where they're going, that the busted turnaround won't be complete as early as originally scheduled, for example.
Just on the school building project, Dave and John, at our workshop, at our joint meeting on the 29th with FinCom, did we also make time at the end of that meeting, John, for Mary Brolin and Peter Light to update us on the building project?
Yes, we're planning for that to be about an hour and 15 minutes for the initial discussion, and there's time for that around 8:15 school presentation.
David, did you have anything to add to that?
No, I was going to say same thing. Yeah, so they've arranged to come to the joint meeting.
Okay, so they'll join us about 8:15 then. Okay.
Yes.
Dean?
Nothing for me.
Okay, so that would.
John, Jenny Kremer has her hand up.
Okay, Jenny?
Go ahead, please, Jenny. You have to unmute yourself.
Sorry, Jenny Kramer, 18 Deacon Hunt Drive. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Jenny.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm here to express my great disappointment that in 2019, this board spent $68,000 defending an indefensible violation of the open meeting law. Specifically, in early 2019, the planning board was seeking new members. A candidate who is an attorney volunteered to serve on the planning board.
Is this a citizen concern?
Yes. He was interviewed and unanimously recommended for appointment by the Volunteer Coordinating Committee, but some members of this board did not want him on the planning board. So instead of considering the candidate's nomination in an open meeting as is required by the law, John Benson, Dean Charter, Joan Gardner, and Peter Barry talked and emailed one another outside of a public meeting and made a plan to block the candidate's nomination. These serial communications are completely prohibited by the open meeting law. The prohibition is not an obscure or confusing part of the law. It is basic open meeting law 101. Although Mr. Charter had only recently been elected, John Benson is an attorney who has served in numerous capacities on the board. Peter Barry is a retired municipal attorney, and Joe Gardner had served on the board for over a decade. All had received the required training on the requirements of the law. The plaintiffs in the lawsuit wanted the board to admit that the violations were intentional, but this board refused. As a result, there was a trial in the case at which all of the board members testified that they did not realize they were breaking the law when they engaged in these prohibited serial communications. The trial cost Acton taxpayers $68,000. I'm very disappointed in the judgment of the board members who engaged in clearly prohibited conduct. I'm very disappointed in the board's refusal to admit the violations were intentional and in the board's decision to defend this lawsuit at great cost to the Acton taxpayers. Thank you.
David, that was in citizen participation, wasn't it?
Yeah, I just saw her hand up. John, I just let you know that but yes.
Yeah, if anybody, we could make the decision of Judge Karen Green of the Superior Court available to any citizen who would like to read her findings and memorandum of decision. And I would take sharp disagreement to Ms. Kremer's characterization of the board's actions in 2019. Her facts are entirely wrong. And I just refer you all to Judge Green's memorandum and decision where it was one unintentional. The matter was tried on whether it was one violation. Was it intentional or not on Joan Gardner's part? Judge Green found it was an unintentional violation. We had offered to settle that matter repeatedly. The lawyer for the three Acton plaintiffs repeatedly refused, made demands of the town that Judge Green said she had no authority, no power to order. So it was tried over a very narrow issue and the town prevailed. I would agree there was no reason to spend that type of money. The other side was incredibly unreasonable. And I'll leave it at that, but go to the decision. Okay, so where we are now is we were due for a continued hearing on the 67 Powder Mill special permit. The Acton Board of Selectmen will hold a public hearing on March 15th, 2021 at 7:10 p.m., continued from February 22, 21, virtually on Zoom, https://zoom.us/j/5039-18785 on the application of Old Mill Development Trust for a site plan special permit number 0928-20-480 under zoning bylaw section 10.4 at 67 Powder Mill Road, map J3, parcel 59-6. The application and accompanying plans can be inspected at the planning division office in Town Hall during normal business hours. For information on how to participate remotely and to view the application materials, go to http://doc-acton-mass.gov/ds-web/view/collection-1277. The petitioner has requested a continuance to April 5th, 2021 at 7:20 p.m. John, do you know the reason for the continuance?
Not specifically. I believe it's still related to wanting to work some things out with people that are stakeholders in the project, but I don't have a specific reason other than it was requested to be continued.
Okay. Okay, is there any discussion on the request for the continuance? Jim?
As the selectman assigned, I just wanted to report that I continue to talk to people in departments about the development. And so if citizens have any questions, I'm happy to be contacted.
Okay. So if there's no further comment, do I have a motion to continue the public hearing from this evening to April 5th, 2021 at 7:20 p.m.?
So moved.
So moved. Thank you, Jen. Is there a second?
Second,
Second, David. Okay, David, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Carter Grant,
Aye.
Ms. Gardner,
Aye.
Mr. Charter,
Aye.
Mr. Benson,
Aye.
and I say aye, so that's unanimous, John.
Okay. So the next matter would be from COVID-19 response updates from John.
Sorry about that. Thank you. As mentioned earlier, this is just past the 1 year mark for when Friday the 13th of March 2020, when was the last time public buildings were open in Acton in the entirety. And a lot has happened in that time, and it is something I'd like to reflect on at some point. I'm still working through some parts of it. So there's not much time to reflect right now, but we certainly will soon. So just to bring you up to date, we're at currently we've had 808 people in the community infected, according to our records from contact tracing. There are currently 16 people in isolation, which again is on the lower side of where we've been in quite a while, which is a positive trend. But we're still maintaining diligence and asking people to do what they can to keep each other safe. Some guidance has been issued recently about those that are vaccinated and what that means to how you interact with members of your household. So we'd encourage people to closely look at that. It has changed in the last few weeks, and it may continue to change. So just keep an eye out on that. One thing that was mentioned earlier is that the schools by the state were ordered to open April 5th. Elementary schools, the older kids would be starting later. But we're as an organization in a position right now where, if you recall, over the summer, towards the end of the summer, we did a lot of things in terms of customer service and extending our building outside, and we're about to start doing that again. But in addition to that, and doing things like the browsing at the library, we're going to start doing that again very soon. But I wanted to mention to the board tonight at this meeting, provide an opportunity for any input on sort of the reopening phase. We're looking to set a date to reopen the buildings. There's a lot of vaccination work that has to happen, but we want to have a date in mind. And if we can't meet it, then we can extend it. But some other communities are opening already, their town halls and other buildings. And we haven't gotten a lot of complaints about our building not being open. I think we're doing a lot of good work to get people's services with that obstacle still in place. So we were thinking the end of April or mid-April to start opening things up a little bit, and just wanted to get a sense. I asked Cheryl to talk to the Board of Health as well to get feedback from that body on that idea. And staff is still working on what that means. Different groups will be able to open in different ways. I think we see the Human Services building working on an appointment-only basis, even if it is open more, just to kind of maintain some control on what's going on in the buildings. And it wouldn't just be an open house like it used to be. But we want to see if there's any feedback from the board on that matter right now, or I can keep going on my comments, whatever you prefer, Chair.
Okay, any comments from board members? We're addressing opening up in small ways. Dean.
Yeah, I think a nice, careful rollout is a good idea. I think, middle to end of April sounds like a reasonable time frame as more and more people get vaccinated. And, hopefully by summertime, we might start having public meetings in person. Again, it's obviously during the summer, it's a lighter schedule, so it's probably an easier thing to implement. If people feel comfortable with that. As far as the human services building goes, again, I think we have to balance the potential health issues with the issues with social isolation that so many seniors are dealing with. And hopefully within another month or two, most of the folks that are using the services up there will at least have the opportunity to get vaccinated. Whether they choose to do so or not is up to them. But I hope that in the foreseeable future, we start to see that human services building start to open up for some programs and whatever can be done. Thank you.
Other comments? Joan?
Yeah, I'd just like to applaud John for his leadership during this year and all of the town employees who've cooperated in making services available to the public in this very difficult time. I think John's done an amazing job, and many of the staff members who've manned the windows in the back of Town Hall have been so courteous and attentive to the public. I just want to say thank you.
We all second that.
Thank you. I appreciate it. A lot of people working very hard. So thank you.
So what buildings would you think of opening in the mid to late April timeframe?
Well, I'm looking at Town Hall and particularly the library, I think, is rolling out a program to do in-person browsing again. I don't know a specific date for that, so we're not ready to announce it, but it's something that they tried in the early fall, late summer. It worked out really well, where people would have a half hour to come into the building and get books and then get out. They're gonna work on rolling that out again soon. But yeah, so I was thinking the town hall, the police and fire, the public safety facility, that lobby has been closed technically. So we think that that's something that could probably start opening up very soon. As we know, first responders were one of the first to get vaccinated, and to the extent we could give people an opportunity to access that service, I'd like to do that as soon as possible. And, as I mentioned, other facilities are more on a case-by-case basis, but that's the general. I come back, I guess I wanted to see tonight if there was any reaction about, no, we need to stay closed through the calendar year or anything like that before we went too farther along with planning. I plan to come to our next meeting with a more concrete plan if I hadn't heard that any feedback.
David?
Yeah, I think this is a good idea. I think we're ready for it. Just asking about, do you have ideas what you do with staff? I think the staff are more dense, if you will, in the building than the members of the public that come in, from time to time. So do you have going to alternate people or spread them out in a different way, or what do you think?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we've worked cohort schedules already. We had those in place for quite a while, and those will continue in the near future until everybody's in a different place from a health standpoint, vaccination standpoint, I guess I should say.
And I agree with Dean that whatever we can do with senior center programs, I think a lot of people are very interested in those. Whatever is allowed by the state as far as small groups of vaccinated people or whatever. Whatever meets the state requirements. I would just be in favor of that.
Jim?
Well, we share a funny jurisdiction with the Board of Health in these kind of matters. So I'm really glad that Cheryl's talking to the board tonight. So I'm hoping between their input and our input, that'll help you form a great plan, John. And looking forward to reviewing it next time.
Well, thank you all for the feedback. The Board of Health is actually, I think, meeting a week from tonight.
Okay, great.
They will discuss it at the next meeting. I have some other updates, if that's okay, Chair.
Sure, please.
So from the vaccine front, we held another second dose clinic last week. In addition to that, the mobile vaccine clinic where we've visited homebound people. We are actually reaching out and I'd like to formally reach out to people and say, if you know someone or if you are someone that is homebound and haven't been served by a vaccine clinic, if you could reach out to the hotline or the Council on Aging and get your name on our list, because we do get a very small amount of vaccine from the state, but that is one niche that they are letting us fill. So if people are homebound, let us know, and we'll try to add you to the list for when the next time we get vaccine. Speaking of that, from a larger scale standpoint, we're advancing the planning with the 8 other communities in our region to try to develop a vaccine clinic, which would have to be open 5 days a week. And the preliminary thinking is that we could hold it at the Kmart property. There's a lot of hurdles to get through, including approval from the secretary and the administration. But it's something that we are putting forward, I think, in a letter to the state this week to say we can do it. We have qualified people in Acton and the other 8 other towns, and we're ready if you're willing to give us the shot or a shot with shots. So that's kind of the update there. And if anything comes of that, I'll let the board know right away. It wouldn't be till mid-April at the earliest if it were to be approved. So it's not something that we think would happen quickly. So that's the update there. The American Rescue Plan Act, which was signed into law, or maybe it hasn't been signed into law yet, but it's basically approved at the federal level. And that we're still trying to understand exactly what that means to Acton, but it appears to mean some significant financial relief, more than we received from the CARES program. So we're still evaluating exactly how much and with what strings will be attached. But early indications are we will have access to funding before the end of this fiscal year. It will be more than we received from CARES, and it will have less restrictions than CARES had, those are all good early indications. But we will certainly continue to follow up on that with our state partners and let the board know exactly what we can use that for when the information is provided. Just a couple things, some other money that we made available through our $1.6 million CDBG coronavirus grant. We've written a few $10,000 micro enterprise grants to local businesses, but we have capacity for many more. The eligibility requirements are a little bit difficult for people to meet, but we encourage those out there that have businesses of 5 or fewer employees, or if you know someone that has one. It doesn't have to be brick and mortar. It can be a home business. It can be some other kind of business, as long as you have a presence in town, you're providing services to the community, and you meet these requirements. You should apply for it and contact our office, or you can contact the hotline 978-929-6600 for more information. We're also offering childcare subsidy grants through the same funding source. So if you are interested in that, please contact us as well, or contact Laura Ducharme directly. And the food pantry, we were able to provide $40,000 of support to the food pantry from that very same program I just mentioned, which is a good boost for their programs. But we also, through a partnership with Laura and Austin here in Town Hall, we actually took a transportation van last week and made a bunch of deliveries from the food pantry because people are having trouble getting to the pantry. So it's exciting collaborations and innovations continue to happen as a result of this crisis. So I'm really proud of the work that people are doing here in the organization, and I'll try to continue to share news and updates when I have them. So thank you.
Thank you. So the next item 5 is discuss extending the $25 per month reserved commuter train parking rate until June 30, 2021.
This is a follow-up request. The board has seen this twice since last March. We're essentially not getting a lot of traffic at the commuter rail lots, and rather than having people give up their spot because they don't use it anymore, we'd like to give the option for them to hold on to it for $25 a month instead of paying the full freight. And we'd like to extend that through for a few more months, if the board's okay with it.
David?
It says June 30th, but I'm wondering if we want to go through August 31st. the summer is traditionally a lower parking period at the station. And I think once we get to the fall, some people are predicting horrendous traffic with more people staying in their cars. I think there'll be, the demand from at the station will pick up quickly. So anyway, I would recommend, we can do the June 30th thing, but I would recommend, so we don't have to vote on it again, August 31st.
Is comments on David's suggestion? So would there be a motion, Dean?
Yeah, I'll agree with David. I think that makes sense rather than bring it back repeatedly. What David said pretty much sounded like a motion, so I'll second that one.
Okay, we'll take it as a motion to extend the $25 per month reserved commuter train parking rate until August 31, 2021. David's motion, Dean's second. Is there any further discussion on the motion? Okay, then David, if you call the roll, please.
Mr. Snyder Grant,
Aye.
Ms. Gardner,
Aye.
Mr. Charter,
Aye.
Mr. Benson,
Aye.
and I also say aye. So
Just John, circling back to on your COVID-19 report, did all of the individuals, about 200 plus, who received the first dose either at our public housing sites or home visits, did they all receive the second dose?
The first group of people that we vaccinated have. The second group of people are due in a few weeks. And
Okay.
those people have been contacted directly. The clinic that we hold will not really be open to the general public. It'll really just be to get those people their follow-up dose.
Okay. Thank you. So the next item is to approve a letter of support for technical assistance applications. Is this a letter? This is a letter that was in the packet, John. Can you just set it out, please?
Thank you. Yeah, the MAPC offers technical assistance every year, and you have to apply for it competitively. In this case, the town is actually putting in two applications. One is being discussed tonight by the Green Advisory Board for work related to climate action planning, and the other is related to a regional effort called the Neshoba Greenway, which I know Selectman Senator Grant has more details about.
Jim, do you just want to fill us in on what the Neshoba Regional Greenway?
Absolutely. And I noticed that Franny Osmond's in the audience too, and might be able to fill in additional details. But she and I have been talking about this. So basically, the Greenways Initiative is a long-term project to connect up, to allow safe pedestrian and bicycle access between our towns in this area. There's a big vision called the Landline Vision from the MAPC, which is like towns all in the 103 towns in the MAPC region. But there's a smaller effort involving Acton, Ayr, Bedford, Bolton, Boxborough, Carlisle, Concord, Devons, Harvard, Hudson, Lincoln, Littleton to work together on this planning. And it looks like David has put up the plan in process, which includes not only our existing rail trails, but the notions about how to connect them. And that includes potential trails in Acton and in our surrounding towns, some of which would go on existing roads and some of which would go on new rights of way that would need to be developed. So this particular assistance grant is a grant that's being led by Littleton, and it would provide technical assistance from the MAPC in just getting this group of towns to work together together and make progress. This is not a proposal to actually build any particular bikeways, or it's not a commitment to how this particular map looks right now. It's just a commitment to work together on this. And we already have a member of the Transportation Advisory Committee ready to serve as the Acton liaison to this group.
Okay. So, John, would this be a letter you're to sign or I'm to sign?
The two letters, and one was in the packet, the other one I can share right now. They both basically say that we're applying for assistance, and they're written from the chair, from you.
Okay.
Ask tonight would move for the board to authorize you to sign it on behalf of the board. And I can show you the other one if that's helpful, which I imagine it would be. Again, this is something that Andrea has been working on, the Green Advisory Board, and we're trying to get some support from MAPC to help with our climate action planning. And the GAB is discussing exactly what that support looks like, but this is just, we thought a letter from our board would help any eventual application that we put in, and this is what it would look like. So I'd ask that the board consider approving both of these for the chair to sign.
Okay. Do we need a formal vote on this, or could we do by consent?
No formal votes needed.
Okay, so is there a go-ahead for me to sign both of the letters on behalf? Okay. So
Yes, please.
Okay, good, will do. Would you want me to come by tomorrow?
We can have Lisa work with you on that.
Okay,
maybe
fair enough.
And since I mentioned Franny, I would just like to say that there are about 30 people 27 people in attendance. She always likes to know that sort of thing.
Okay. Then the next item, number 7, is approve a letter of support for the Acton Housing Authority's project eligibility application. This is for the Main Street Senior Housing Development. It was in the packet. This is customarily what we do when 40Bs, the process that Nancy Tavernier had established, that it would come before the Acton Community Housing Corporation and the Board of Selectmen separately to give approval, the go-ahead on the project eligibility application, and that gets submitted to the Department of Housing and Community Development. So are there any questions on the letter that was prepared and for me to sign as chair of the board? All good?
Just a question I get. Yeah, I'm fine with signing it. You used the phrase 40B. I just wanted to clarify that this particular project is not a 40B project, I believe. Isn't that correct?
It's going there, yes, as a 40B eligibility application. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay. Right. I was confused. Thank you.
Okay, so I'll go ahead with that, and I'll work with Lisa on getting that signed up, John. Okay. Okay, so item 8 is discuss the drive-up window zoning bylaw proposal. We all received a memorandum from Kristen Gashard. And Dean, let's have you lead the conversation because you had been our point person.
Okay, thank you. So I think, as the chair noted, we did receive a fairly extensive memo and the results of the surveys that were done in the 2 public forums, showing what I would call pretty overwhelming support for the idea of drive-up windows. Interesting split in the demographics of who voted in favor of these things. Almost a 2-to-1 majority of women over men voted in favor of allowing drive-up windows for pharmacies and restaurants. And I suspect that's because no matter how advanced we think we are, women are still stuck with a lot of the childcare and go to the drugstore kind of things. They're having to deal with this all the time. So it was interesting to see those numbers in black and white. So there seemed to be a great deal of support for it. I don't know if there's 2/3, but there's certainly a great deal of support and interest for it. And I think it's important that we look at this not as just a COVID-related thing, but there's some long-standing issues with access to pharmacies when you've got a sick kid or a sick adult in the car with you. Certainly, we know from a lot of anecdotal information we've gotten during the forums that people are driving to other towns and going to pharmacies and going to drive-in restaurants so we're losing that opportunity for our businesses here in town. So I think I'm content with the idea about moving ahead with it. We did have a good meeting with the planning staff and the design review board last week. And DRB put together a really good memo that I think you've all seen. Generally speaking, they're not in favor of these, but they took the attitude that if you're going to have them, this is what you should do in order to implement them. A couple of things that I found interesting came out of this. My original thought was that drive-up windows should be a by right situation in all districts. And I think, and this is the benefit of meeting with DRB and benefiting from their understanding, you start to look at the complexities of trying to do drive-up windows in some of the more congested areas, the village districts. There's some real tight geographic constraints. There's a lot of other issues with those districts. So personally, I'm favoring the idea that in the village districts, this be a special permit required. I still think that there should be allowed, but I think the application of drive-up windows is going to be pretty limited in the village districts just because of dimensional requirements, curb cuts, people not having enough circulation space around the backs of buildings and that sort of thing. So it's going to be limited, and there might be very few going in those village districts. But I think it's important that if these are going to happen, that there be a real good opportunity for feedback with the town and the property owner. So personally, I'm in favor of that. I think DRB is sort of in favor of making this a special permit situation for all districts, because certainly there are unique constraints, even in when we think of roomy areas like on Great Road. But I'd leave that to the board to see how you want to go ahead with that. But I think we've gotten some good input. We've had some studies, the forums, we've got a lot of numbers from that. We've got some great input from DRB. So I would frankly, I know they're looking at having a hearing with the planning board later on this month. So I hope it'll proceed and hope that we can bring it to town meeting and hope that we can vote some sort of a bylaw to get things started to cover at least pharmacies and restaurants in all districts under certain conditions. And I'd be interested to see what other folks feel about that.
Comments, please? David?
Yeah, I generally agree, maybe with two exceptions. One thing in the DRB letter is they recommend starting with pharmacies and then expanding to restaurants at a future time if the pharmacies work out well. I think that's a good idea, and I have to say that feedback to me personally kind of mirrors that. I've run into many more people who are in favor of drive-up pharmacies than are in favor of drive-up restaurants. And the second thing is, I think it should be by special permit everywhere. I think even on Great Road for us, our properties are not enormously roomy. It's not like these big boulevards you get in other parts of the country. where you can easily have a line that snakes around a large building. I think in many cases here, it's going to be very difficult to fit a queue of cars, especially at a restaurant, in the morning drive time and things like that, without risking backing up onto the street, even on Great Road, or blocking a sidewalk or other things. And I think that needs to be assessed on a case-by-case basis in the same way that we would want a traffic study for other kinds of development. So, and that's only, the blocking the sidewalk or street is only one issue. I think there are quite a number considering the size of our property. So I would be in favor of moving forward for pharmacies and by special permit everywhere.
Okay, Jim.
I was tasked with at our last meeting to reaching out to the West Acton village merchants, and I got 2 letters back. One from Paul Swiden, who's owner of Willow Books, and one from Saad Dino, co-owner of Acton Pharmacy, and their points overlapped, which was basically that they assumed that it'll be very difficult, both for financial and historic district and the real estate reasons, to have any drive-up windows in West Acton itself. So they see this as enabling competition that will be very difficult to overcome. That if a chain restaurant gets the right to sell coffee in a car, then each one of those sales is a sale away from Acton Coffee. And similarly, from Sabdino's point of view, he feels like he's done a lot to enable people to do curbside pickup and delivery, and he feels like he's met that option and has helped hold on to many of his customers, but that a drive-up window in Kelly's Corner is going to take business away from him. And so they definitely got all the other arguments in terms of the convenience and how people would like to see drive-up windows, but they just want to make sure that their perception is that it's a move against the West Acton businesses.
Joan?
Yeah, I would support the drive-up window bylaw, and I think there are a lot of places on 2A where the drive-up window will work.
Okay, so Dean.
I think just to follow along on Jim's comments, it's obvious that this is like many other situations you face if you're a business person. Not everybody gets the benefit of these things. People made decisions to place their businesses where they are. And I think, certainly it's great to have the bookstore there in West Acton. I'm not aware of any drive-up bookstores, so I don't think there's going to be a lot of, the browsing line would be really long. And certainly Saad's done a great job with reaching out to folks. I think he's created a great niche there with the compounding operation. And I know when my mother was alive, she benefited greatly from the delivery that they did from the pharmacy. So I hope that it doesn't cut into his business at all. I think what's going to happen is that maybe the folks that are driving to drugstores in surrounding towns because they got a drive-up window will actually use the pharmacies that are here in Acton. So a lot of businesses, we could pass this thing, and 5 years from now, there could be 2 or 3 more drive-up windows in the entire town. I don't think, we're not going to look like, the big thing years ago was we don't want to look like Route 9. It doesn't look like Route 9. And I would like to give folks as many options as possible to take advantage of this. That being said, I think it's important that the board be able to come to town meeting with a united front on this. And certainly, if the majority of the board says, just go with pharmacies this time and we'll catch you on the restaurants later on, I'm good with that. I think, getting a start is more important than going in again and and having it defeated.
Well, do you think we should, take the full bylaw that covers both restaurants and pharmacies to the public hearing on March 24th, and get the, the feedback of the public hearing, and we
What
could,
about banks? What
banks
about,
have it already.
Not in West Acton though.
Okay, so would the sense be to take it, both ends, pharmacies and restaurants, to the public hearing on March 24th, get the feedback and reevaluate from there as to how we should proceed on to town meeting? What I remember from the last one was in 2015 or 2016 when this bylaw came up. It for both operations, it failed by just a handful of votes. So go with a draft bylaw for both then on to the March 24th public hearing. Is that a consensus?
Yeah, I'm sure. Sorry, I'm going to raise my hand.
Sure.
I am sure that it's a good idea to take this to town meeting. I mean, I think the voters have a right to weigh in on this again. I have a preference that we end up with one, either pharmacies or restaurants this first time around. But I'd be willing to be persuaded by discussion. So I think going ahead to the planning board with both is probably a fine next step.
David?
I'm okay with going forward to the planning board meeting. I would like the draft to be just special permit at this time.
Mhm.
And because I think with the size of our properties, even on Great Road, there are going to be, at least for me, we've done a lot of work with sidewalks and other things. I want to make sure that it's accessible to others and how the thing works. I personally have stood in just my body in line at a bank with a car in front of me and a car behind me because the drive-up window was open and the bank was not open. And I didn't get there by car. Otherwise, I would have put my car in there. So that was frankly, rather uncomfortable. And, because the exhaust is coming from the car in front and the guy behind kept inching forward a little bit, so I want to make sure that, I understand that people support these and that kind of thing, but I think that we want them to fit the character of the town, fit the need of the town. And I think the special permit is the opportunity for us to make sure that that'll be done right.
Dean, what do you think?
I could go either way with that. I think that what David is suggesting is probably what's going to come out of this, but I think, let's hear a little more information in the planning board hearing. But I'm not sinking my heels into the ground one way or another. I think there's especially my discussion of DRB was eye-opening about all the technical issues with that. So, but I would, let's not make a firm decision one way or another. Let's let the planning board and the public input go through, and then we'll be ready to move ahead from there.
You okay with that, David?
Yeah, I am okay with that. Just can I ask a follow-up question?
Sure.
How can we let the public know in a way that's accessible to everybody the design review board's opinion, right? To me, that's important. I'm wondering if we before April 24th, is it? We want to have the representative of the DRB come present to us. I thought their input was excellent, basically because it fit my opinion. But it was really well thought through and everything, and I think it's important for people to know that. I don't know if the DRB is interested in doing that, but I would be interested in townspeople knowing what's there.
I can reach out as the liaison to DRB. I can reach out to those folks and forward that invitation. I can deal with John and John as far as finding a suitable time on an agenda and see if we can follow up with that.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Jim?
Some of the DRB thinking was reflected in the planning department memo to us, which is in our packet. So at least that's publicly available now. And I guess as a matter of, I was comfortable with the sort of the detailed technical stuff in the planning department memo, and I'd be fine if the planning department was rolling that into the whatever they presented to the planning board. I mean, there were little things like a change to the sign bylaw to allow one extra sign related to the drive up, and sort of little things like that that seemed well thought through. So I'm assuming that by going ahead with this, we're also saying, yeah, use that planning memo.
Okay, so is the consensus then to go forward with our earlier position to drive up windows for both restaurants and pharmacies, considering either as special permit or by right in all districts in town, and advance that along and see what the public reaction is.
Yeah, may I just ask one follow-up question?
Sure.
I'm sorry. How do we generate the wording of the proposed zoning bylaw change that goes into the warrant? Is once it goes through the planning board, is then the wording set, or how does that work? I'm sorry for being unfamiliar.
Dean?
I would defer to the town manager on that, as I know that they've got quite a bit of wording done already, but I'll defer on that, answering that question.
So we're required to post legal notice in the paper for the public hearing for the zoning change that's being discussed. And I believe some form of the language is included in that legal notice, if not all of it.
And is it unchangeable after that? Or I'll be devil's advocate here. Suppose that, either the planning board or we wanted to just go forward with pharmacies and not restaurants. And then what we put in the paper was both. Can we change after that, or do we have to punt until the next town meeting?
No, I think we can make sure that the legal ad doesn't create that situation. I'll work with planning on that.
Thank you. And John Benson, there are two people with their hands up.
Sure. Sure, please.
The call-in user, please go ahead.
Hi, this is Tara Fredericks from West Acton, and I just wanted to clarify, and I sent an actual copy of the paragraph, the disclaimer in a sense, from the DRB memo, because it sounded like he was saying, and I may have gotten this wrong, but it sounded like he was saying that the DRB wanted special permits for drive-through windows, and it didn't sound to me like the DRB was at all supportive of having drive-up windows at all, and I specifically spoke against them because of the nature of plans to try to be more walkable, and then trying to put in drive-throughs is counter to that. Anyway, so I forwarded that. I wanted that clarification. Also, I think there was a point that was missed relative to just if you have businesses that feel disadvantaged in the villages, small local businesses, by large chains getting the drive-up windows on Route 2A, it doesn't matter if they're way over on 2A. If they are in town, if they're anywhere near, this is going to disadvantage these small businesses to the point of putting them out of business. One of the business owners told me that if CVS gets drive-up windows. So I strongly urge you to do a survey that is only for the business owners, the small local business owners, not the chains. I really, frankly, don't care what they think. It's nice. In fact, I think we should figure out how to raise taxes on them, figure out some way by square footage or something like that. But either way, I feel like we haven't heard from the small businesses that would be directly impacted. Thank you.
Thank you. Alyssa Nickel, please go ahead.
Yeah. Melissa?
Thank you. This is Alyssa Nicole from School Street. I just had an idea about spreading the word since there's only a week and a half before the planning board hearing on March 24th. David suggested that people should really take a look at the the design review board memo, which I read and I agree it's phenomenal. I have a lot of respect for the people that sit on that board. And I think that if it was included in the news flash from the town, a link to that document, if the link was posted on the town's Facebook page, that could readily be shared to all the different Facebook pages that are in the town, and that way people can come to that planning board meeting with the knowledge that was in that design review board memo. Thanks.
Thank you. So are there any further citizen comments?
No, that's all, John.
Okay, so Dean, then go forward.
I'll reach out to DRB and we'll proceed from here. Thank you.
Okay. So next on the agenda is preliminary feedback on the FY2022-2031 Capital Improvement Plan ahead of the planned joint board presentation by John on March 29th. So
Thank
John.
you. Members of the board, I'm very pleased that we were able to present a 10-year plan, and the presentation on the 29th will be an in-depth look at how we came up with the plan, some explanation of what all the content in there means, and why it's a useful tool for us to use as we look at our long-term financial planning for the next 10 years. And it's something that, it's the first time we created it, and it's going to get better every year. So I think we've made a lot of progress. I think it's in pretty good shape, but there's certainly some little things that we can improve on going forward. The purpose of bringing this forward to you on the agenda tonight is simply that if there's something in there that is a non-starter or people want to give me feedback, I want to make sure I have that opportunity before the big presentation on the 29th. So that's just really the purpose of the agenda item tonight.
So comments from board members? David.
I just thought that the plan was very good. I've gone completely through it once. I need to go through it again. There's a lot of information there. I focused a little bit more on the coming year. It is very good. I don't have any objections from my point of view. It's an excellent reflection on the town's upcoming needs for the next years. So it's very good. Thank you.
Any other comments? Jim?
I wrote down a pretty detailed memo with a bunch of little detailed questions that he was able to answer. I'm looking at my memo now to see if there's anything that would fall into the category of a showstopper. I don't think there is. I mean, I think this is the first time we've had a full 10-year plan. So there's going to be feedback, and there's going to be, each year as we roll through this, we're going to be looking ahead again and making adjustments. The main thing I saw out in the the outer reaches of the 5 to 10 year plan that I saw that was missing potentially was something that I would look back at the Acton 2020 plan. One of our key goals was providing more opportunities for community gathering and recreation, and a lot of the specific tasks under there were about enhancing our existing parks and buying more open space. But there was a specific one about designing and building a community center, which has been a big topic of conversation over the last few years, sort of jump-started by the Kmart parcel. But even if assuming it's not there, there's still I think room in the long run for us to start gathering requirements and needs, understanding what there could possibly be in such a facility, And because it's going to be a big deal if it happens, because obviously things like this tend to be very expensive. So starting soon might be good. It might be, for example, a goal that we might have in the upcoming year to think about, to start understanding the elements of what might go into a community center. We also have this opening after the initial senior center lease runs out. As we think about whether we want to renew that lease or not, we might be ready to think about whether we want to combine senior center and the rest of the community center. That may end up making sense. So that was the only big hole I could see. The only other thing I mentioned in there was, it feels like in some years, starting this year, we may be running low on funds for open space purchases. And but then what I realized after looking at John's responses is that a lot of that is running through our community preservation funds, which is not really part of this capital plan. And I think that's okay, as long as we keep in mind that if some of our capital needs relate to purchasing open space, we have to look beyond this 10-year plan and make sure we're thinking about the community preservation funds.
Dean?
Yeah, a couple of questions and comments just to follow up with Jim on the community center idea. I think we've got 6 or 7 years left to run on the lease for the existing senior center. So, I worked on trying to get a senior center for probably a dozen years. So it's right around the corner when you think about this. Mm-hmm. And there have been some folks that have been interested in, marketed the idea around about a community center, and a few of these individuals, what I've suggested to them is, come up with a list of what folks see in this facility. Is it a multi-generational thing? Is it just a senior center? Is it going to include a couple of pools? I mean, it just, it's easy to decide to spend somebody else's money until you get stuck with the bill. Potentially, I would think that we're probably talking, $30 million is not an unreasonable number. And then figure out, what the tax impact of that would be for however many years. We've got the issue also of siting such a facility. We've had a 4-year battle on trying to figure out where to put in a little dog park. And, frankly, that was a major issue when we looked at providing a location for a new senior center, was trying to find a spot for it. So it's a daunting prospect. And then in addition to the $30 million to build it is all of the operational issues.
Yeah.
I'm going to fund that. I mean, that could potentially have a higher tax impact than just paying off the debt on the thing. So I'm not going to say that we shouldn't think about it, but I think it's a big project. It's on the level of building a new school or something. So if people have ideas, if people are interested in it, they should start thinking about it. But there's some major stumbling blocks there. A couple of the questions that I had looking at the capital plan, and I'm not really sure whether they would. Well, they're probably more budget issues than anything else. So I'll hold off on the comments about that until the proper time. The other thing, and I'm not sure whether this fits into the capital plan or if we should add it in there, is some discussion about going back to the dog park, whether there should be some money allocated in next year towards supporting the idea of a dog park. That was a goal that was reached by the Board of Selectmen to build the dog park, and we all thought it was a great idea, and then we turned around and we told CPA, well, you guys pay for it. We think it's a great idea, and you guys pay for it out of your funds. So I think I'd be open to hearing a suggestion, either as far as a capital plan goes or as far as just, next year's operating budget. whether we should pony up some money out of town funds as opposed to CPA funds. I mean, they're all town funds. As we've discussed before, this is a tough year for CPC because there's been so many more requests than there's money. I think the request right now for the dog park from CPC is about $90,000. You know, if we can make a down payment, if we can find it somewhere in our budget for next year, I think that would make CPC feel a little better that they're not getting stuck with a whole tab on this. That's about it. Like I say, I've got some other questions, but I think they're for later meetings.
Anybody else with feedback for John? Okay. Okay, is that, you've got it, John?
Thank you. That's helpful. Appreciate it.
All right. So, next item was discuss Acton Leadership Group's financial model and proposed use of reserves. John?
Thank you. So the Acton Leadership Group meets leading up to the budget process to help balance out the revenues that we're receiving for the expenditures that both the town and the regional school districts plan for the community next year. Because of the way town meeting timing worked this year, the process is a little quicker on the ALG side of things than it normally is. But I think the school district is making a presentation of their final budget, or their mostly final budget, I think later this week. And so at the last ALG meeting, there was a lot of discussion about ways that we can close the gap to bring the deficit to zero, so we have a balanced budget going in. As you all know, I presented my budget on March 1st, including the capital plan, and there's been discussion about how that fits into the overall available revenues. So I wanted to take the opportunity tonight before the ALG meeting on Thursday to have a discussion with the board on your thoughts on a proposal that I've been working on with the finance folks. So the goals for what I'm about to discuss are three. One, the first goal is to address concerns that we've heard from the Finance Committee over the last 6 months about their concerns about our free cash use. And they actually created a reserve policy within the last 6 weeks or so that suggested that, or recommended that, we always maintain at least 3% of our total spending in free cash, which effectively puts a ceiling on what we'd be able to spend each year, which we haven't really had in place before. They also recommended that we do have the capital stabilization fund, and they recommended that we use that to help offset capital needs this year to allow us to maintain free cash balances going forward. There's also been a little bit of discussion since I presented the budget about the dog park. As just mentioned, there is a CPA grant funding application for design work related to the park, and the dog park committee and staff are going to go after a Stanton grant to actually pay for the construction of the dog park. The Stanton grant requires a match from the town, and what we could do is so this proposal that I'm going to give you right now is to help support that need and work that into the 22 budget as well. And finally, the goal is to resolve the budget deficit, which right now is $220,000 at the ALG table. So this is page 44 of the capital plan that we just discussed. It's probably hard to read. I apologize. I couldn't do my best. But if you're following along at home, it's on page 44 of the capital plan. This outlines the capital projects that we proposed this year. And I tried to highlight with my pen. It's a little messy, but I did my best. There are four main buckets of capital projects. The first bucket is general fund operating projects. These are projects that we actually have inside the operating budget that fund annually investments in things like police cruisers and bridge repairs, sidewalk repairs, small equipment replacements that we just do every year. And they're technically capital, but they happen so frequently that they actually are part of the operating budget. And it's been this way for a long time here. The second bucket is free cash projects, which you'll usually see as their own article at town meeting. we proposed to appropriate, in this case, we were recommending $580,000 for the following projects. And that's the second bucket. The third bucket is projects that we propose to borrow for. And in the capital plan that we presented, it's funding for Kelly's Corner streetlights, funding for the town center construction project, a matching fund for the River Street Dam, and funding to advance the design of the DPW facility. All in all, we were proposing to use $1.232 million in free cash to fund the entire capital program. And so there's a lot on this slide, but the main point here is we wouldn't be able to appropriate all of that and still stay within the Finance Committee's recommendations for what we need to maintain as a floor of free cash. They want 3%, which would basically mean we have about $700,000 to spend in free cash. So appropriating 1.2 is not going to work if we want to honor and try to adhere to what they were recommending. So we have a plan that we can make some modifications that would accomplish that goal. So the first thing would be to add 21,000 to the town budget. This is, you may think we're going in the wrong direction here, but just wait. I'll get to the other part. So increasing 21,000 would provide for a $25,000 match because we already have 4,000 in the budget for the dog park. So that would actually make the budget, instead of being a 2.50 increase over last year, it would increase it to a 2.56 increase over last year. So that's the first recommendation. Second recommendation is to adjust the total use of free cash down to 595,000. And how we make that work is we would use it to fund the operating capital that I discussed is always in the operating budget. And then 4 of the projects that we had proposed for free cash: the diversity position study and implementation, the tree assessment, the vacant storefronts program, and the dog park match. So we would use free cash for those 4 projects plus the projects that are in the operating budget every year. Then we would use our stabilization fund. As I mentioned, we have about 2.1 million in stabilization. Transferring 658,997 from stabilization would keep us with a balance of just under 1.5 available in the stabilization. And what I would propose that we do with that is use it to pay for the first year borrowing costs for the 4 borrowing projects that I mentioned earlier, and also to pay for the projects, the remaining 9 projects that we were initially thinking would be paid directly from free cash. The additional step that I would propose to do to balance the ALG deficit is to reduce the amount that we set aside each year for overlay and exemptions, which is the pot of resources that the assessor and the Board of Assessors use to fund abatements and also tax exemptions. And this amount is something that we think we can absorb as a change. And it's something that we also can continue to monitor as we get to town meeting. So I'm going to try to show you again with some colored highlighting of what the moves I proposed here are. And I can email this to you afterwards with a magnifying glass if that's helpful. But basically, the things highlighted in green are things that we would pay directly from free cash. That would be the general fund operating fund projects, the diversity officer position for 85,000, the tree assessment for 30,000, vacant storefronts for 20,000, and then the dog park match for 21,000. Those 5 things equal 595. And then to break down the stabilization funds, those are the pink or magenta items, which is brush chipping equipment, the net zero vehicle replacement program, complete streets investments, fire alarm systems, sustainability programs and initiatives, a forklift, some new replacing gas-powered extrication tools with electric ones, and some technology upgrades for police cruisers and sidewalk program, and the debt service for the 4 projects. So I know that was a lot to take in, but the summary is that we would be able to reduce the amount of free cash that we're using by supplementing it with a transfer from our stabilization. Doing this would allow us to maintain a balance in our free cash, which is well above 3%. And we'd also have a balance left in our stabilization, which is, I think, enough for now. And we could also commit to try to replenish that in the fall or whenever we are able to do so. So those are the major changes that I'm proposing to how the budget is laid out and integrates into the ALG plan. I think that was my last slide. Right, so reserve replenishment. So, as I've been saying all along, we put several controls into place in the budget, and those controls should result in some turnback at the end of this year. We also, we think that our revenue targets will be off a little bit in certain areas. We're also learning that we may be able to supplement some of those shortfalls with revenue from the new American Rescue Plan Act. That's to be determined. In any case, we're estimating that we'll be able to generate at least $500,000 in free cash when we do the recertification this fall. And this replenishment will help make sure that we maintain adequate reserves to both protect ourselves from needing to make emergency investments and also to help our bond rating agencies continue to think that we're maintaining an appropriate level. So thank you. Is there any comments or concerns or feedback on this proposal?
Oh, good job.
Well done. David?
Yeah, I've been following this very closely, and I attended the last FinCom meeting and spoke with them there about it. I think this is a good plan. From my point of view, I'm a little disappointed that the stabilization fund is not used for bigger items, because I think that's what it was intended for. But we're in kind of a tough place this year for a couple of reasons. We're transitioning to the FinCom's new guidelines and other things. So I think this is a very good plan. And I actually like the fact that we're beginning or trying to figure out how to use the stabilization fund. I think one important thing there, which John mentioned at the end, is figuring out our policies for how to replenish it, right? We haven't used it, either taken money in or put money in or taken money out. It's just been sitting there mostly since it was created. But I think now that we're beginning to use it, we should, firm up our policies about how we're using it. And I think a good place to put money back, or a good time to put money back, is in our fall town meeting. After our free cash is certified, presumably. I think the free cash certification takes some months, and usually our town meeting would be after that. And then, it might be appropriate to put some money back into the stabilization fund. Either that, or we develop a regular policy similar to the fact that we have a convention really that of using $400,000 a year, or putting away $400,000 a year to the open space set aside. It's just a convention, right? There's no requirement that we do that. Similarly, we could have some kind of convention here for what we add. But I think a fall town meeting is good for that, because then we know how much turnback there was from the previous year and stuff. So anyway, I think this is a good plan, and thank you, John, for figuring out how to do this with the guidelines. By the way, I think the FinCom's guidelines are good. Keeping the free cash between 3 and 5% of total town spending. That's a pretty tight window to hit, I think, actually, because we might on average turn back close to $1 million a year. Some years it's more than that, like last year. Some years it's less than that. We are trying to fit it in, predicting in January which are going to hit there at the end of the fiscal year. That's you have to be pretty careful throwing your dart there. But I think the guidelines are good, and they'll keep us in a good solid footing in our bond rating and everything.
Other comments? Dean?
I'll concur with what David said. I think it's a good plan. I like the way it got put together. And I look forward to a fall town meeting when we can start to replenish that stabilization fund. But, you know, this is a particularly odd year. So, yeah, some of these, I agree. A lot of the things we're paying for our stabilization aren't what I would have thought was stabilization. But, you know, I understand the situation we're in. We got to, you know, find the money wherever we can, you know, reach through the couch cushions. So I think it's a good job. I commend the town manager.
Jim? Jim?
Oh, it's making sense to me. I had a couple of questions. One was the 3% that we're keeping in free cash. Is that it seems like there's a situation where we have a certain amount of free cash, we do spending from it, and then we get our amount of free cash gets certified later on. So there's sort of this dip and then a rise back up again. Are we keeping, is the 3% the target for the dip amount, or is it for after we get the money replenished? I'm a little confused about where the 3% actually gets done.
So the way that I'm interpreting the policy is they want it to always be available. So our free cash was certified at 6/30/20, and that's what we have. And until it's certified again, they don't, my interpretation is they don't want to consider it. So that if we appropriate at town meeting, we'll be reducing the amount from that certification amount. And I think they want the floor to be held in that scenario rather than relying on what we will be replenishing, which we will be replenishing it.
Got it.
So David?
Yeah, also, just to answer your question, Jim, kind of in the spirit of not counting your chickens before they hatch, the FinCom does not want to consider or estimate or forecast turnbacks for this year. So that 3% is the minimum on the ALG spreadsheet, not counting any turnbacks from this year. So if we hit that 3% kind of, let's just say exactly, then John is able to turn back $500,000, then we'd have 3% plus $500,000 actually in certified free cash by the DOR next year. And then we could choose, for example, to put $500,000 or some portion of that into the stabilization fund in a fall town meeting.
Yeah, Jim, further to your question, free cash gets replenished from generally two sources: turnbacks at the end of the fiscal year and revenues in excess of conservative projections. That's where it got built up in a number of years. And it takes the DOR probably till sometime in mid to late September to certify your free cash, the town's free cash amount as of June 30th, a couple of months earlier. So that's the lag coming. But John, are you anticipating a turnback of about $500,000?
Well, we haven't finished the third quarter yet, so it's difficult to project, but that's something that I think we would be able to look at as a minimum. Yes, I would expect it to be more than that, but I wouldn't want to say how much more.
Okay, but that's a fair, you're comfortable with that number?
501,000.
Too much. Okay, so any further comments? We have an ALG meeting Wednesday morning at 7:30, and so the two things that we would be presenting was on our budget, and then how do we resolve this $200,000 budget gap, which you proposed from the overlay fund, John. And
yeah, so the combination of a transfer from the overlay, combination of a reduction of what we're putting aside for the overlay and the changes in reserve use would balance the deficit out.
Okay,
Zero.
well done.
$10. We'll figure that out.
Okay, so we're all behind John. Thumbs up. All right.
Thank you.
Okay, so item 10 is discussion on 11, presentation from the Agricultural Commission of Right to Farm Signs and approval of proposed sign locations.
I believe we have a very brief presentation on those sign locations from someone from the Agricultural Commission. who I believe is, let's see, is it Bettina, or do we know who? Dean, do you happen to know who's joining us?
Patrick Hearn?
Patrick Hearn.
Okay, thank you.
It'll take just a second for him to rejoin. Patrick, you can unmute yourself.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Hi.
So, are you going to present the slides on your end, or would you like for me to? Do I have the privilege to open a slide set here?
Yeah, you can if you'd be more comfortable with that. I can also present them.
Oh, sure. Why don't you present them, and I'll ask you to turn the pages.
Okay. 1 second.
So while that's coming up, thanks for getting us on your busy agenda. And I'd like to report the AgCom is newly formed, but coming together very nicely, and it's a great group to work in, and everybody holds up their hand and volunteers to do things. So we're making progress. So what I'd like to talk to tonight is increasing farm support with right to farm signs. I'll show you what the signs look like and where we're recommending they be placed. And we went to quite a bit of effort to place these strategically so they minimize sign clutter and reduce traction at some of our scenic town boundaries. And at the end, we're going to ask for $300 support for the cost of the signs. Next slide. So there are 12 signs in total, and I'll show you in the next slide where we're going to suggest we place them. There's two types of signs. At the major intersections, we have the existing entering Acton signs, and here sometimes you do get other signage, and to minimize the clutter, we're suggesting we just add a sign to the existing sign, which is shown on the right. And the other locations would be a smaller sign about the size of a speed limit sign, 12 by 18, placed on T-posts. So, and the $300 would cover the cost of the signs. That's an approximate estimate, but we do have a quote for that. And I think the process is that we would get the signs made and give them to the engineering department. So there'd be some small added costs there for the cost of the posts and putting them up. That's not included in the 300. Next slide. So these are the locations, and we've been working with the IT department, and they've drawn up a map for us for their existing farm locations. So you can see there, the green is agricultural land or 61A land or existing farms, and the brown are the animal farms, primarily horse farms. So, and there's a legend and so forth. And so ultimately, when we have our ag plan together, you'll be seeing more of this, and there'll be more discussion about the farm locations here in the town. But if you look at the markers with the red asterisks, those are the main intersections, and the ones without the asterisks are the single, the signs that are placed on the individual posts. So we're proposing adding on at either end of Main Street, at Great Road going into Boxborough, and Mass Ave, I think, going into Stowe there, I believe it is.
Yeah,
And then the others would be the standalone signs. And these locations were chosen primarily because at these entrances, they're most of the major entrances to the town, but at these entrances, you do have farmland nearby. Next slide. So there's at least 3 locations where they have these very, I think they're beautifully simplistic historical boundary markers. And what we're recommending at those locations is that we place the right to farm sign further down from this boundary marker, so as not to detract from its simplicity and the sort of the historic markers and so forth. Whereas at the other major intersections, like the one on the bottom left, where Great Road comes in from Concord there, we would do an add-on sign at that point. So we're basically trying to minimize sign clutter at the major intersections and also keep the signs away from some of the very simplistic and beautiful boundary markers. Okay, next slide. And that's basically the right to farm sign proposal. If you have any questions, I'll try to answer those for you. And we'd like to get your support.
Sure. Thank you very much. Questions from board members? Dean.
Well, I think it's a great commission, and I know they put a lot of work into this to try to minimize the clutter, and I appreciate that. And I just hope that, well, the town manager is looking through the couch cushions to balance our big budget. If he can find them their $300, that would be good too.
Okay, anything else?
What's the timing on this?
Well, I would say probably 6 months. I think it largely depends on how busy the town engineering department is. I don't think it would take long to get the signs made, probably on the order of, I'm guessing now, I'd say 6 weeks. And then it would depend on how quickly the engineering department would be able to put them up. I mean, were you thinking in terms of pushing it out a little bit, or what was the intent?
No, I've seen the signs in other communities, and I know we voted this in, and so I've been wondering, what the timing was. So by Labor Day?
Sure. It's really depending on the engineering department, but if they can put them up quickly, certainly, yeah.
Okay. So, David.
There's several people with their hands up.
Sure. Yes, here.
First, I'm going to let someone from the Natural Resources Department, which I assume is Tina.
Hi, yes, just wanted to let you know that it wouldn't take very long. Create a purchase order, and it would probably just take a couple of weeks to get the signs made. So it wouldn't take very long on that, and we'd do it as soon as possible.
Thank you, Tina.
There's several more, John.
Sure, please.
Franny, please go ahead. You're one out of 31 people.
Thank you. Yes, I always saying that we should really show who's here. I just wanted to see that sign again, or just hear if Route 2 was on the list of places where you enter Acton and would see a sign.
Route 2 is tricky. It's a state highway, and it's complicated to get sign. Are you talking about the bigger signs that, like for example, at the exit to Central Street from Route 2 going southbound, or rather west? I think it's eastbound. For example, where they have the multiple signs. There's one there for Honeypot Hill and I think Idlewild and that sort of thing on a big blue sign.
Oh yeah, no, I wasn't thinking of that, but that is a possibility. I was thinking it was too complicated to put it right on Route 2 as you're coming west on Route 2 and enter Acton, and you're right next to the farm field that's right on Weatherby Street. Maybe we could get one just when it becomes Acton land, because that would get a lot of visibility, even though it might be too small. But I was just thinking it would be nice to sort of celebrate Acton as people are coming on that ugly highway.
I agree with you. You do get the sort of the major highway benefit there. The difficulty in that is that when you start dealing with Route 2, you start dealing with the State Department of Transportation, and there's a whole new set of rules there. If you call out a specific location, you have to not only mark it, it's not only the sign, you then have to have trailblazing signs. And it can't be more than 3 miles from the sign that's on the major highway, and there can't be more than 4 turns. So, and you have to have a sign sort of leading you to that location. At least that's what the regulations say. So it gets complicated, and there's also an annual maintenance for that. So we thought, given the times right now, we should maybe put that, consider that for a future request, in other words. But I think it does do something different. Having that visibility on the major highway is good, but I think there might be ways to do it less expensively.
Okay.
Is there anyone else?
Yep, 2 more. Deborah Simons, please go ahead.
Thank you. You guys can hear me, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Hi, Fran. I'm glad to see this happening. I am very glad to see that you've divvied this up into 2 kinds of signs for different settings. My big thing is always what stuff looks like. And Fran, I'm wondering, are these renderings that the Stay Safe people gave you? What these look like in the presentation?
I did those in PowerPoint. This is Pat, by the way.
I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I don't know why I said Fran.
It's because
Hi, Pat. Sorry.
It's okay because
No, I do know why, but yeah, okay.
Pat could be a girl's name, but or Fran could be a boy's name. But that's my wife, by the way.
You're both androgynous, whatever.
Okay. Yes.
So here's my thing. Because we don't yet have a town designer, I would love to see these designed by a designer. I happen to know one who might be persuaded to do it on a volunteer basis. I like the simplicity. I would like them to cooperate, particularly where they're going to be joined with the historic entry markers. I'd like them to cooperate well with those. So it's just a thought that that's a thing that could happen and would make me happy.
Sure. So Bettina and I have been working on this. So I think I know who you have in mind. So we can give you a call. If we can just sort of leave that design open-ended, would the board want to see the design again before it's posted, or how would we handle that? Not necessary. I think Dean is.
Stop laughing.
Let's get it going.
Okay, good. Well, yes, Deborah, we'll definitely take all your inputs.
Thank you.
And 1 more.
Sure.
Tara, please go ahead.
Hi, it's Tara from West Acton, and I was going to suggest you go to DRB because of the lack of a professional designer at Town Hall. But if Deborah's offering to join in, I believe that I will be supportive of her taste in the signs for the right to farm community, which I think is a great idea. But I am always worried about sign clutter and character, and might as well make it beautiful. You know, we have a right to beauty too, right? Thank you.
Yeah.
I had a question for Dean. Can you reflect on how this sign strategy relates to the Tree City USA signs, which I'd love to see when I come into Acton? Are these in similar locations?
I've put some of those Tree City USA signs up years ago when they were removed, and now that Ryan's got the program going again, he's put a few more out there. I think they are in somewhat similar locations. I think, and it's a subject for a larger discussion. There's been some talk periodically from about creating more of a signboard directory kind of thing. At the entrances of town, you see in other towns where you'll have a right to sign, right to farm sign, Tree City USA, Lions Club Kiwanis, whatever. So that they're all kind of in one place. But I'll leave that for the DRB to worry about. And, we can always bring back the sign bylaw police.
So, do we have to vote any appropriation, or John, what would be required to move the signs forward?
Well, it would be helpful to have a vote of the board saying that you support having these signs generally in the locations proposed, and then we can take it from there.
Okay, so do I have a motion? No, let me finish the motion. A motion that the right to farm signs in the locations as proposed in the presentation are supported by the board. Joan, so moved?
You need a second. Yeah, I moved that.
Yeah, okay, and Dane seconds. Okay, any further discussion? Then all in favor? I'm sorry, David called the roll, I'm sorry.
Mr. Snyder Grant,
Aye.
Ms. Gardner,
Aye.
Mr. Charter,
Aye.
Mr. Benson,
Aye.
and I also say aye. So we're getting signs.
Okay.
Go get 'em.
So before we move to the last item, let's just do the few consent items. Consent item 13, approve meeting minutes February 22 and March 1st. 14, approve executive session minutes February 1, 2021. 15, accept give Council on Aging from Renate Winter for $100 towards the Council of Aging gift fund. So is there a motion to approve consent items 13 to 15 inclusive? And is there a second?
Oh, I'll second, sure.
Second,
Or
okay.
Dean will.
So David, if you call the roll, please.
Mr. Snyder Grant,
Aye.
Ms. Gardner,
Aye.
Mr. Charter,
Aye.
Mr. Benson,
Aye.
and I say aye.
So the next item is item 12, update on the vacant Kmart property, a potential proposed concept for reuse. As I indicated several weeks ago, I was stepping aside because of a possible conflict with the counsel for the proposed developer. And Dean Charter is the new point person on the Kmart redevelopment, and I will turn the meeting over to Dean at this point to run.
Okay, thank you. So I'd kind of like to set the table a little bit before we bring in the folks from the outside. Kmart parcel has been a subject of discussion and concern for years now. There was a proposal, citizens petition, a year or so ago for the town to consider buying it. That citizens petition did not pass at town meeting. There have been various entities that have looked into purchasing the property, and a lot of the very preliminary discussions went on between the potential buyers and members of the town staff. There was one that we thought was going to go ahead, and they dropped out concurrent pretty much with the COVID emergency. More recently, there's been some discussion, interest from Ocean State Job Lot to come in and purchase the property. That one dropped off the table. So this is the latest in a long list of proposals. I've had preliminary conversations with the developers just to get some idea as to what they have in mind, and express the town's interest that anything that happens there should be in compliance with the town master plan, should be in compliance with the transportation improvement plan for Kelly's Corner. The town has a real interest in what goes in there to make sure that it's a beneficial situation. So the proposers, it's a company called National Development, they'll be coming in, giving a very brief presentation. And because this is such a preliminary situation, I don't foresee that there's going to be a dialogue from the citizens and the developers. I would like to see citizen comment so that people can express their opinions one way or another, and certainly the folks from National Development will listen to all of that. They've been very much in listening mode. I did facilitate a meeting with these folks and the Council on Aging Board that occurred last week. So those folks kind of know what's going on, but this is extremely preliminary at this point. It's conceptualizing it. So I'd like to have, a good understanding of what they've got in mind, and certainly provide the citizens with the opportunity to provide input, but there's not going to be a back and forth for it. This is just not the time. And with that, I'll turn it over to the town manager.
Thank you. So as Selectman Charter mentioned, the development team from National Development is here. It's Edward Marstener and another one of his associates. I'm just trying to promote
I think I actually have Ed's name, but this is Matt Davis, so I need to rename myself. Sorry about that.
I just promoted both Eds, so hopefully
Perfect.
They're the real one. Okay.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for having us tonight. I appreciate it. Sounds like there's been a lot of kissing of frogs on this site over the years. So hopefully we can be the prince here when all is said and done, or at least not a frog, but we'll see. So I appreciate everybody hanging in there. I know you had a long meeting, so we'll try to be brief tonight. Matt Davis is joining me. He'll be working on this project as the project manager if we move forward here. So thought it'd be good for everybody to meet him as well. As Dean mentioned, we are very early in our process here on this site. One of the things we like to do early on is have conversations with the community and key stakeholders to understand priorities for the site. I've been doing this for over 20 years now, and I'm sure there are a lot of differing ideas for the site. I know whatever we propose, we can't be everything to everyone. I've certainly learned that over the years, but quite frankly, if we don't have a project that we think can meet or exceed many of the priorities that the town has for the site, we'll move on. We only do deals in the greater Boston area. It's never about one deal for us. It's all about a career of deals and finding projects that can be win-wins for the cities or towns that we do work with. So tonight, I'd just like to provide a brief introduction on national development. Matt will provide a quick overview of what our preliminary thoughts are for this site. You'll see, as Dean mentioned, it's really nothing more than a concept, a sketch at this point, but we hope to continue to meet with folks in town, refine this plan over the next couple of months, and be back in front of the town with a detailed project and plans so that boards can evaluate it appropriately. On national, we're a local company headquartered in Newton. There are really two things I think that define us as a company. One, we're a vertically integrated company. We have our own capital. We fund our own projects with our own money. We have a development team that permits, designs, and manages our own deals. We have our own construction company that builds our deals. And most of the time, we also manage our own deals. So we're really involved with the entire process from concept through completion. And we like that because it allows us to maintain the level of quality and control that we like to have with our projects. And we hope that shines through at the end of the day. The second thing I think that's a little unique about us is we develop all property types. So you name it, we've developed it over the 30 years that we've been in existence, 30 plus years. When we find a site, we evaluate it for all the different uses that are out there, determine what we think is the highest and best use for a site, given a whole host of factors, including the market, a specific area's needs, a city or town's goals, and the economics that are required to make a project successful. Those are all, some of the things that we think about going into a project. For the Kmart site, we initially evaluated it for several different uses after having a preliminary conversation with a few people in town, reading the Kelly's Corner provisions in the town bylaw, which were actually really helpful in guiding some of the preliminary thoughts. We pretty quickly honed in on senior living with some village retail and a lot of connecting open space on the site as being what we thought would be an optimal use for the location and consistent with what at least a lot of what we were preliminarily hearing and reading was in the town's goals for that site. Can you flip to the next slide, Matt, please? We have an extensive history with senior housing in our portfolio across what we call kind of that whole continuum of care. We have over 55 apartments. We have independent living projects and units, assisted living, and memory care. And as you go down that list, it kind of gets into stronger support services as you go from top to bottom. Memory care is our specific Alzheimer care component of projects. And we have extensive experience in all of those product types. As a company, we've completed over 30 projects in New England over the 30 plus years, past 30 plus years. And we're excited to bring this experience to Acton to work on this project now. Next slide, Matt. These are just a couple pictures of different projects that we've done. This is a project in Wellesley, actually right near our office. It's another project in Brookline that we did at the old Circle Cinema site. Anybody who remembers going there to see a movie, the old Ground Round was on that site near BC campus. And this is a project we did, Goddard House in Brookline, which I think is probably more representative of the type of architecture and scale that we're envisioning for this site. You'll notice the attention to detail, the landscaping, really all part of these communities, which make them special places to live. And I think this is a good representation of what we would be thinking for this project. So with that, I'll turn it over to Matt, who will give a little more specifics on the specific Kmart site and some of our thoughts there. And it's really nice to meet everybody, see some faces, and hopefully we'll get to spend a lot more time with you all going forward.
Yep, absolutely. So appreciate the opportunity to kind of share some initial thinking and hear from the town and from the board. I know you're all very familiar with the site, but we find it pretty helpful just to kind of look at the existing conditions and talk about some of the key takeaways and character that's there today. As Ed was talking about, really the existing building does not meet the intent of the Kelly's Corner zoning bylaw and planning effort. Particularly, it's entirely paved. It doesn't provide amenities to the community. It's not pedestrian oriented or pedestrian friendly. And actually, even on Google Earth, you can see in the bottom left image, there's a number of kids kind of cutting through the back of the site from Mass Ave to Main Street. And so that's kind of an unsafe condition. And it also is a very vehicularly oriented site, built at a time when really the car dominated everything. And so the building's set very far off the street. There's a significant number of parking spaces on the site. And really the primary way to access it, unless you're a school kid cutting across it, is by car. So as we looked at how to plan the site, we spent a lot of time digging into the zoning bylaw and trying to understand the goals and objectives of the town. And as Ed said, we honed in on this combination of continuum of care, senior living, and Main Street retail that's oriented toward Main Street. So compared to that initial aerial, I think that the first takeaway is that there's a dramatic enhancement of green area and landscape and a reduction in parking spaces on the site, as well as a kind of positioning and breakup of the building so that the larger building is nestled more into the rear of the site, and that's the senior housing building. And then fronting Main Street, there's two 8,000 to 10,000 square foot in the aggregate, so 4,000 to 5,000 square foot each, smaller scale retail buildings that are really pedestrian oriented, front Main Street in a comfortable scale, have front doors there, and also obscure the parking areas that would live behind them. And one of the things that we're really excited about is this concept of a village green that you can see between the two retail buildings. And the vision there is an open space or kind of plaza that can be activated by the retail. It can also be used by the town for farmers markets or other events. And then there's a pathway that we're thinking could connect via a safe and protected way Main Street to Mass Ave. So we won't have the kids from school cutting through parking lots and things like that, but can have a direct point of access that's also a comfortable and nice walk. And that really actually jives with our senior housing program as well, which focuses on different outdoor spaces and gardens and kind of a comfortable living areas for our residents. So those are kind of the preliminary elements of the site and the amenities that we're thinking about including. And then as you kind of transition over to what our senior living offerings are and what that continuum of care is, Ed kind of touched on it, but basically we try to create a living environment that provides the ability to age in place and really to allow seniors as they age to access different levels of service and be able to continue to live independently in our residences. And with that comes a number of indoor and outdoor amenity spaces. And we think really the kind of complementary neighborhood-oriented retail will work quite nicely for that and offer the opportunity to leave your residence and go for a short walk and access services. So we're excited about that kind of combination of programming. And then, as Dean mentioned as well, engaging with our local council on aging and finding synergistic programming is also a great opportunity for this facility and the greater Acton community. So quick and brief overview of our site, and obviously a lot of details to continue to work out. I'd just say in summary, we're really excited about fitting into the Kelly's Corner master plan and zoning bylaw. We think that it really will create a dynamic and great place and pretty dramatic improvements to the existing conditions of the Kmart site. So would welcome hearing any comments or thoughts, but really look forward to a more robust dialogue as we dive in a little further and continue to develop our plans.
The only thing I'd add just briefly to that, Matt, is, we're well aware of the TIP project that's planned for this area. We actually think it's great. We think it's really synergistic with, our plans and the walkability of this site and bringing the pedestrian in, and bicyclists to and from this site, which is one of the things early on that really attracted us to this site in this area was the major investment that's going on there and how compatible it'll be with this project. And at least what we've shown, to date here, it's fully consistent with curb cuts and everything in that plan. Which we think will be a really, great connection with everybody here. So exciting stuff, to think when that's done, if this project was done in the same time frame, they would, deliver at roughly the same time, and we'd be a little after that, and it would be a great amenity for this part of town.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to hear if there's any comments from members of the board, and then I open it up if there's any comments from the citizens. And I can't really see all the rest of you, so.
Jim and I have our hands up.
David.
So thank you for this. It looks like an interesting project. Are you expecting for those two front buildings that you would own them and rent them, or is that something that you would sell?
Yeah, it would all be part of the project, and the plan would be to lease them. There are no current plans. It's obviously very early on. They're just diagrams at this point, so we don't have specific retailers in mind, but we would plan to lease them and own them longer term. So that the whole site, I think what is important with a site like this is to make sure that the programming and the level of quality and care for all the landscaping and all that stuff is consistent throughout the project. So it has that consistent feel. So the intent would be to keep that together.
And would you build those to suit, or would you build them with some particular function, like one retail, one restaurant, and then try to lease them?
That's a good question. Ideally, if we had retailers up front who we knew we were working with and had a specific program, that wanted to go in here, we certainly have done both. We've done a lot of retail communities over the years. One of the larger ones, Market Street up in Linfield, a project I worked on a while back. Maybe some of you have been to. So we've done a lot of this product type, and it could be either. But if there's not pre-leasing involved, then we would, build out an aesthetic in a building and then look to lease it.
Just one more question, Mr. Vice Chair, if I might.
Yes.
How many residents would be in the long-term, I forget what you called it, age-in-place facility?
Senior living residents, yeah.
Senior living residents, sorry.
No, I think we're still trying to pinpoint that specifically, but likely between 100 and 120 is our current thinking. But we're still fine tuning that plan.
Thank you. Thank you.
Jim?
I don't have a lot of questions at this point, but I was wondering, in your preliminary analysis, does this fit our current zoning bylaws, or would it need variances?
That's a great question, Jim. That's where we've probably been spending the majority of our time to date, is reading through, the bylaw carefully, because there's a number of different sections in there that relate to this parcel, and obviously the special provisions in the Kelly's Corner district. So our hope at this point is that we have a project that can comply with it. That's our current intent and goal here. So as of right now, no plans to vary outside of the zoning. There are a few things that I think could lead to minor things with some setbacks and some current things that are in there. It could lead to a better layout and project, but I think if we can do it obviously without zoning changes, that would be our preference.
I think that's it for now, Dean. Thanks.
Okay. Any other questions from?
We got Joan with a question.
Okay.
I thought the Kelly's Corner plan had the driveway from Charter Road and the driveway from this site lined up.
Yeah, they do. So the Charter Road, the entry to the schools there is actually going to move. It's going to move over as part of that project, the TIP project. So what we're showing here, and again, this is just an initial sketch, actually would line up with the new intersection, and we'll make sure that whatever is done here lines up and creates the four-way intersection there. There's actually a traffic signal, as I'm sure you know, for that intersection, and a bus stop, and it's great. I think it's a really good plan, but absolutely all of that will align.
Okay, any other questions from board members? In that case, David, do we have any citizens out there?
There are 2 people out of 26 with their hands up.
Oh, well, let's get going.
Oh, now more hands are going up, so hold on. Christopher Hardy, please go ahead.
Yes. Hi, everybody. My name is Chris Hardy. I'm at 284 Great Road, and I have 3 quick questions. One's kind of the statement. In Acton, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't know all the statistics, but this is what I've heard, is that 45% of the population is family-oriented. So what are the benefits of a senior assisted living to that 45 or more percent who have kids in school, who have young kids, who would benefit from something else other than a senior assisted living center? I mean, and then my second question is, if you did build this, instead of building those 2 extra buildings next to the main road on Main Street, what if you were to provide the town of Acton with a community center? Would you be interested in doing something like that instead of having 2 separate buildings, having an assisted living center and an Acton leased, possibly, community center built to suit?
So I'll take those in order. So how I would think about your first question as a person who has I have 2 kids of my own, 2 boys. A couple of things. One is there's very minimal negative impacts on a town related to schools, traffic, a lot of benefits from a senior housing project like this, which is one benefit. Obviously, for the school kids, many of whom got through here and use this site today, there'll be a benefit to having safer and nicer paths as they go over to, grab pizza or go to Starbucks or all the different places, that they visit today. The other thing I'd say is all of us, have parents and older members of our family, and these projects can be a really great amenity of having mom or dad close, when they need some additional support out of the home, and have an ability to have people age in place. I'll tell you, in all the towns, we're constantly in conversation with different communities in Mass, in Eastern Mass, and probably the single biggest comment we get when we reach out to town managers and planners in terms of product type that they're looking for in their communities is senior communities where people can age in place. They want to get out of the single family home. They want to stay in town to be near their kids and their grandkids, and they just don't have great options today to do that. So it's a product type that actually is generally very well received by families in towns for those reasons. The second question was, remind me, related to
Community center.
Community center. So this question came up in one of our initial discussions with the Council on Aging as well. And I'll answer it the same way. One of the things I always say is the things we can do and we can't do in our projects. First of all, the retail is actually one of the goals and desires of the Kelly's Corner bylaw. They want to activate that street front with additional amenities for the town, retail amenities. So it's actually something that's specifically discussed and desired in the desires for this area in that bylaw. And secondly, a project of this size simply can't support a requirement like that. I think as was talked about earlier in the meeting, I joined a little earlier and listened. Those community centers are extremely expensive. I know something of that size is about a third of the size of this project, just to put that in order of magnitude. It's a very, very large undertaking. And quite frankly, a project like this just can't support it economically.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Tara, please go ahead.
Hi, it's Tara from West Acton, and I have a couple questions first, because that will all the rest of my questions and comments rely on the answers to these. So I want to make sure I understood, because I didn't get the presentation until I figured out how to do it. Are you talking about the Goddard place is what you would propose, or the Waterstone, or whatever it is? What's the...
There's no proposal. There's no design at all. To be very frank, right now we have not done any architecture. We're actually still figuring out our unit mix here. So we figure that out first, and then we put it into design. So those were just images of other projects we've done. This will be its own unique project. So we're not proposing any of those things at this point.
Okay, I just want to understand what it was, because you said something about we were envisioning this for Acton, or that this was an example of something that we wanted for Acton. That's all I was wondering.
Yeah, the
clarification.
The Goddard House one is more of the scale. So just to give you a feel, the bylaw is a 36-foot height restriction in this area, and that project is more in line with that massing and that scale. So that was the comment as related to that project, versus those other ones, which were 4- and 5-story projects in very different massing and scale and architecture than you would see on this site.
Great, thank you. So that now that I've heard that, I want to tell you I really like this concept. I agree with Chris about the community center, and I urge you to take a look at the senior center. Apparently, the lease comes up, and I think the Acton's paying like $100,000 a year, so that might be an idea. I love the idea of intergenerational. So Chris brought up what benefit would it be for kids, and I think having old people around is a good benefit. I like the idea of wide porches on any buildings that have seniors in them, and the front buildings. I thought I heard you say something about 4,000 to 5,000 square feet, and I like smaller. I'd much rather have more smaller. I don't know how the numbers work out, but I don't want anchor chains. I don't want this to be a rest area on Route 2. I would like it very much to be small stores, and I think that's it. About governance and co-housing. I don't know if you can fit that into the whole thing. Is this like a corporation that would run a senior living place, or would they be individually owned, like condos? I'm very interested in, the democratic aspects of living. Thank you.
This is a rental model. It's not a for sale buy-in model. These would be rented by, by folks coming in, operated by an operator that, that we would work with for the project.
Thank you.
David, before you go any further, I'd just like to address a couple of the comments about the community center idea. I believe the existing footprint of the senior center is around 20,000 square feet.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if we were to go with a larger operation with a community center, multi-generational sort of thing, it'd have to be in excess of 20,000 square feet. So obviously that would dwarf the two buildings that Ed is suggesting here. Another issue would be that the existing parking configuration for the existing senior center, I believe our lease calls for 100 parking spaces. So there would end up having to be more than that. So I think what happens in order to put any kind of a community center in here, in addition to what's being proposed, it would totally wipe out the site. And it would actually be in reverse of what we've been trying to push for. It would be a massive building. I think, would probably be the size of this entire assisted living facility, depending on what's been discussed. So it's frankly trying to fit too much stuff on this site. With that, if there's any other comments from the public, David?
Yeah, there are more. I just want to say that some people have their hands up that don't have their full name. And you either need to rename yourself to your full name, please, or put your full name in the chat. Nancy Corcoran, please go ahead.
Yes, I would like to say I love the prospect of having this type of facility in an area where the residents can walk and enjoy the community. I happen to be very, very familiar with a similar project in West Concord called Concord Park. Our former town clerk, Connie Huber, is in residence there, and the former president of the Senior Advisory Group, Pat Ellis, was a resident there. And the idea of them both being able to get out and about was very, very good for their mental health. Lots of nice porches, sitting outside. This is right in the action, as it were. Concord Park is not. It was nestled down behind the train station. However, the facilities themselves, very, very similar to what this project is envisioning. And it gives the potential for the seniors who are residents there to be involved with the community as long as they can be. And having the memory care potential makes it so much easier for them, because the facility is still familiar to them. So I concur with the developer that this would be a project that would enhance the lives of seniors, although we're only 30% of the population. We did build the town. Thank you.
Thank you. Lauren Martin, please go ahead.
Lauren Martin, 26 Marshall Path. I very much like this plan. I like the retail being up front on Main Street, and the green spaces and the paths, and the scale seems about right. If it's like that Goddard building in Brookline, and thank you very much.
Thank you.
Franny Osmond, please go ahead.
Hi, Franny Osmond, 16 Half Moon Hill. I also like what this looks like. I had a close friend at Goddard House, so I can really picture it, and I really appreciated sitting out on the porches outside there. Had a lot of social time there. I love the paths around. I hope that when it's designed, it would have a connection to the congregation Beth Elohim on the next street, and to make sort of ways of coming and going, and also to completely circle the property so that people have circles. I think people like to not have to retrace their steps when they're getting exercise in their neighborhood. I was just wondering, I'm having trouble picturing if it would, and I know you haven't designed it yet, whether it would be assisted living or whether there would be any apartments. And if there were, is there a way to consider the population of adults with developmental disabilities? There are a lot of parents of adult children with developmental disabilities who are looking for solutions in town. And I was thinking in terms of different populations relating. I love the idea of kids, the seniors, and also possibly that population sharing spaces. So I just wanted you to consider that population. That's all. Thank you.
No, I think those are great comments and suggestions. So just to explain a little bit, when we say this is a continuum of care facility, it would have independent living, which are basically the apartment units, more like apartments. There's still services that come with them, typically dining, where there's 3 meals a day and some other minimal services for that. But that's a very active population that ties into a number of the comments that have already been made, and really benefit from all of the open space, the walking paths themselves, and all those tip improvements, the ability to walk to, Roach Brothers or CVS or other things in the area, would all be utilized by them. It's this type of product has evolved so much in the last 10 or 15 years, where oftentimes, they would have been put in kind of bucolic settings in the country and whatever, and viewed that was the ideal model for senior housing and where you bring mom and dad. It's really, much more morphed into settings like this where there are walkable amenities, which is also great for, folks who are visiting their parents or friends in these communities, because there's a lot to do to get out and do while you're there. So that's all a win-win, and we will certainly, touch base and get to know neighbors and stuff as well, related to the comment about trying to connect to adjacent properties and walking paths and all that. I mean, there's win-wins and all that as well. So a number of good comments. I know I didn't address all the good comments made there, but those are a couple of highlights.
Thank you. Mike Majors, please go ahead.
I really like the plan, especially compared to what we have now, where it's just one big parking lot with a crappy brick building on it. I think it honors the Acton plan guidelines. I think it really will be an asset to the community. And one question is, if somehow, through luck or whatever, the Baker Whitney site adjacent to that was freed up, we could free that up. Could you envision like adding more retail space there that would complement the retail buildings you have along 27, or could you maybe add the number of apartment units, living units? This is a theoretical question, but I think that's become available, and it'd be nice to have a plan for that as well. That would complement your master plan.
We we have no intention of that. Let me say that I don't believe that parcel is available that we know of anyway. My comment on that would be, we always try to design projects that are really complementary with the sites adjacent to them. I think this site, with all of its connectivity through the pathways and other things that we're looking to create here, and the porosity of this site would connect very well with those sites, the Verizon site and the other site next to us here. There is some grade change. There's about a 10-foot grade change from Mass Ave down to the bottom or the lower part of our site. So it's not insignificant. There is, it's about a story. So you'd have to contend with that and make things connect appropriately for that. But the real answer is, we have pretty defined timeframes with the seller here that we need to be aware of and address. And if we started layering in other properties at this point, it would certainly add to the level of difficulty of trying to get a thoughtful project move forward here. So I think it's a really good thought, but it's not currently what we're pursuing.
Thank you.
Yep.
Liz Osh, please go ahead.
Sure. Hi, Liz Oshie. I live on Kelly Road, which is pretty much at the bottom right of your screenshot right there. I'm going to echo what Chris said, that even though there's challenges to it, that we are in dire need of a community center. And as you just mentioned about sites adjacent to it, directly at the top of your screen there is 2 elementary schools, our junior high and our high school, all in one big campus. I'm sure you're aware of that, but thought it needed to be said. And while it's nice that there's a green space and a path there for kids to cut through, I also anticipate how well that would really commingle when teenagers start hanging out on the path and in the trees. And is that really going to continue to be a public space, or is that really going to be controlled by the senior living space? So that's one point I have. The second one is you talk a lot about aging in place, and I'm curious if residents of this kind of facility usually are people from the local community, or if they come from 4 or 5 towns over because it's here and it attracts people from elsewhere, or is it really where people who currently live in the town retire and age in place? So I don't know if there's any data on that. And my last point is about the retail. We have a whole lot of empty retail parcels in Kelly's Corner on Great Road. We have a pile of rocks behind CVS that was supposed to become retail that has been a pile of rocks for years. So I guess I'm just curious about how we plan to fill that when there's so much else empty and waiting for small businesses to come in, and that we could just do a whole lot more with that. And I think that the folks in town who have kids at those schools will probably are really pushing to have something there that's useful for their kids, and that there'll be some pushback around that. That's all.
Thank you. So I can certainly address a couple of those. So the data shows, and I'll share a little bit of just how we evaluate these sites and these projects, which will really tell you, what the draw area is for these projects. So almost all of the residency comes from a 15-minute drive time area, which is how we do all of our research and analysis when we're identifying sites. So it does tend to be very local. And we look very closely. We actually do a zip code analysis of the town that the projects are in, and in just the towns that immediately abut it, to really determine whether we think a project will be successful. And we look at things, demographics, the aging population, and all those things pretty carefully. So it does tend to be a much tighter draw than people sometimes think for these projects. And that's just proximity, again, to, typically the children who have mom and dad in these facilities and want to be close enough to visit them. So that's that. It's a good comment on retail, especially today. Retail has been a challenge space. Actually, suburban retail, we do a number of projects in the city as well. Suburban retail has done far better. Our suburban projects have done far better than our urban projects on the retail side, just because there's a lot more daytime demand than there has been traditionally with COVID and more people being home. How that all changes as things roll out and people get back to work, and how many people stay at home and how people work. If anybody on this call knows that answer, I'd love to know it as a real estate person, because we have a lot of office product as well that we're interested to see how that evolves. So I think, as real estate always does, one of the things I love about it is it's a constantly evolving thing, and we'll have to evaluate that as things go on. But, at this point, our goal, it's not a lot of retail to lease. We would certainly love to reach out and talk with, local retailers. We always love to work with local retail. We think it does well in creating, a community setting. That's one thing we'll do. And then, we'll look to bring, other quality retail to this area if that's the direction we end up going in.
Thank you. Mr. Vice Chair, quite a number of people would like to speak a second time. Do you want me to let people speak a second time?
Yeah, I think, we should probably cut it down to give them about 2 minutes, considering the hour. But
Okay. Tara, please go ahead. Tara?
Yeah, I'm done. It's Tara. I'm done. I didn't ask to speak again. I'm all set. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mike Majors, please go ahead.
Oh, no, I'm done too. I guess thought it was like that. Sorry.
Okay. Chris Hardy, please go ahead.
Yes. I just wanted to understand a little bit more since it's like, I think I'm going to be one of the last people speaking from the community. I just help me understand why we think having an assisted living in the middle of town in a place where it's quite busy, it's technically, to be honest with you, it's over by major roads, which on sidewalks aren't that safe per se. Wouldn't this kind of project be better suited to somewhere quieter, like where we have Robbins Park, I believe, over on Main Street, down towards Westford and Narrow Park? That seemed to be a very nice community over there. And I would think an assisted living would be more beneficial in somewhere like that instead of smack in the middle of town. To be honest with you, that's just my opinion.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, I think just to address that quickly, as I mentioned earlier, I think as this product type has evolved, what we've really found is it can be it's really beneficial, certainly to the product, to have access to the amenities, to have that walkability with the amenities that are nearby for folks who are coming, for folks who live here, and for the folks who are coming to visit. It can become, really a neat fabric and part of the community. There are, opportunities certainly it's very common for folks to, school kids to come in and do presentations and sing and do things with, the community that we would have here as well. There's interaction with the town, which can be, somebody mentioned earlier, that multi-generational interaction can actually be a really healthy thing for a community for both sides. I know I used to do it as a kid. I've had grandparents in facilities like this, and it really is a win-win on both sides. So, the science of this type of product is really, morphed much more into areas like this than the suburban or really rural settings.
Just to follow up on that a little bit, I think it's important to keep in mind that there's going to be a huge change in the configuration of Kelly's Corner over the next couple of years, which should come to fruition about the same time that this project would be completed if it goes ahead. It's going to make the sidewalks a lot more safer, enhance traffic signals, that sort of thing. One of the items that was included in the town manager's presentation this evening is funding to fully fund the pedestrian scale streetlights. So we're really trying to make this Kelly's Corner, the vision is to make it a really walkable, pedestrian friendly area. So I think the seniors that are living in this facility would certainly benefit from this. So I think it's will be a lot more attractive in a couple of years than it is right now. The other point I'd like to make is that the senior population is the fastest growing portion of the population in town. They refer to this as the senior tsunami. Lots of folks, I identify as a 30-year-old, but my driver's license says I'm 70. Lots of us are going to end up looking at these kind of options. People who lived in town for a long time. And I think it's good to have these sort of options. Certainly the rural areas are great, but some of the more connected areas would be great as well. And as seniors sell their larger homes, other younger families will move in. But this gives the seniors an option for a place to go. Thank you.
Liz Oshie, please go ahead.
Thank you. I was curious about some more data. What Chris brought up, Robbins Brook, and I'm guessing that you've looked into this. Is there like a wait list for people to get in there? Is that full, and is there high demand for more there? As well as the at least 2 senior living projects that are in the works in Acton that are just up the road. One of them. And my other question is, at the beginning of your presentation, you mentioned that, if it exists, you built it. And I'm curious when you've ever built something that really brings the community together, that you're not just thinking about as a product, but that is something that really is for the community, that might have unique attractions that would bring people from other towns to spend their money in our community and at our restaurants, and what kind of thing that might be.
Yeah, I think the retail, component of this with the Village Green and, the concept of the open space we've had there is a real win-win. I mean, I look at any of our retail projects that we've done. I don't know if you've been up to our project up in Linfield, but it's those types of spaces are, I think, great community draws. And up there we do an ice rink in the winter. Which is highly used. The retailers benefit from that as well, but it's highly used by just the community. Farmers markets, programming and stuff like that, we think is a great benefit for a project like this that everyone benefits from. So I think that is, first and foremost, how most people in town will use this site. And your first question was about other projects in town. I believe the newest one is an affordable project. The other project in town, Robbins Brook, is a memory care, assisted living and memory care project only. So it doesn't have the full continuum of care. It doesn't have the independent living component. As someone raised earlier, having that ability to come into this with more of an apartment style living, with needing very little support, but to stay in one location and with your friends and people you get to know and meet, and not have to leave then to go to another facility and maybe another facility later on as you progress and need more and more support, is what the market's found to be most successful for people. That change of environment as you get older is hard. So that's why that continuum of care is what we like to do in our projects, and that's why we're planning that here. And there's not another project like that in the vicinity.
Thank you. Alyssa Nickel, please go ahead.
Thanks. This is Alyssa Nickel from School Street. I just wanted to echo Franny Osmond's suggestion about units for adult children with disabilities. There's a real need for that in Acton. We have a lot of families here who don't have options. And you mentioned the evolution over time of this type of facility in terms of where it's located and other things. So if the evolution in the future could be looking to integrating those 2 types of living units, I think that would be really well received here in Acton. I have a couple of suggestions because I think Liz had a really good point about the retail and the empty sites in town, and maybe those 2 Main Street buildings might be something other than retail that provides something useful to the community, being really close to the school campus. Maybe there's an organization that could rent out one of those buildings and create a maker space with 3D printers and sewing machines and woodworking tools. Maybe the other space could be a theater that different community theater groups could rent. So I'd like us to start, since this is in the preliminary stages, getting really creative and imaginative about what else that could be. And I just have one comment. I know this is preliminary, but the pathway that goes through the green space, bringing perhaps kids from Mass Ave to Main Street, I feel like it might be better to have that a little bit further to the northern part of the property, because if we're talking about safety, I see that pathway crossing two entrances, exits to the parking lot behind that first Main Street building. So if it could go behind the parking lot, and then that will get kids out closer to Bueno Isano and the bowling alley, and maybe be a little bit safer where they're not having to cross parking lot entrances. But obviously, I'm sure the configuration will change as the project evolves.
Thank you. Nancy Corcoran, please go ahead.
Okay, thank you for being patient while I unmuted myself. I did want just to comment on the notion that that these types of facilities are not necessary in a vital community. There have been studies done where if the facility that the residents are living in is off in a very nice rural area, it isolates the residents and exacerbates the potential for deterioration in their mental cognition, no matter what they have for programs. So I think that's something that we really need to recognize. This will keep our seniors in their mental acuity more vital and more contributory towards our community. Thank you.
Thank you. Attorney Osmond, please go ahead.
Yes, hi, thank you. I'll try to be really quick. First of all, I had a question about whether there would be a light, because it looks like it would be really hard to turn left. Normally, I would go up toward the schools and turn right instead of trying to turn left there. So that's one question. And then I just wanted to sort of answer to Chris Hardy that I'm like thinking I want to age quicker so I could move into a place like this, because it would be close to open door theater, which I participate in, anything else going on in the schools. I could walk to stores. I could take a bus or walk to the train. It would be a very lively place for me to live if I were moving into a senior community. So I just wanted to say that. And also those trees look so small compared to the trees that you see in the other places. And so I'm realizing, I hope that you would plant big trees that would become bigger like those. But so I have a question about the light, or about how one would turn left right there.
Thanks, Fran. You're welcome to come with us to every meeting too. So we'd love to have you. The trees are just shown as, is just placeholders, obviously. But yeah, there'd be a mix of, all different kinds of trees, including, big oaks and things that you've seen in other pictures. Just to be clear on, there is the massive $15-16 million TIP project that the town has been undertaking for quite some time, that is very specific with the state about where the curb cuts are for this property, and where the traffic signals are. There's a traffic signal, over at Charter with the schools on that side. There's not a traffic signal proposed for the Main Street entrance here, primarily because there's another traffic signal in close proximity there when you get up to the intersection with Mass Ave. So one thing I will say, there's dramatically reduced traffic trips in this program. There's minimal retail here, 8,000 to 10,000 feet, and the senior project drives very, very little traffic, very little in and out traffic. So we actually don't need that large of a curb cut that's shown here, but we are showing exactly what is in the TIP project with multiple lanes in and out. We would probably only need one lane in and out here, but we don't want to mess with that because the town is so far along in the design and receiving that funding from the state that we just don't want to mess that up in any way. So whether that evolves and is minimized going forward, we would be okay with that. But I just want you to know why we're showing what we're showing on this plan.
Thank you. One person's hand's going up and down. Your hand is now down. If you'd like to speak, put your hand back up, please. Tara, please go ahead.
Yeah.
Tara, did you want to speak? I guess not. So that's all, Mr. Vice Chair.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Ed, and Matt. You ended up on the hot seat a lot more than I thought you were going to, but appreciate all of the answers and the input. It'll be interesting to see what happens next, and I will yield the chair back to the through the real chair.
Thank you, Pete. Well done. Okay, so that completes our agenda for this evening. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Joan, and a second?
Second.
And David, would you call the roll, please?
Yeah, Mr. Snyder Grant?
Aye.
Ms. Gardner?
Aye.
Mr. Charter?
Aye.
Mr. Benson?
Aye.
And I also say aye, so we're adjourned.
We're adjourned. See you all on the 29th.
Bye.
Good night, all.
Thank you.